Something terrifying has just emerged from Prince Edward's legal team. Hidden royal documents have finally surfaced, exposing the shocking truth behind the structure of his titles, and what's written inside has left royal insiders completely stunned. Behind palace walls, panic is spreading fast as these official papers reveal details the monarchy never wanted the public to see. Questions are now exploding across royal circles. Who approved this? What was being hidden? And why is this revelation causing such chaos inside the royal family? The deeper investigators looked, the darker the story became. What started as a quiet legal matter has suddenly turned into a full-blown royal controversy, threatening to ignite tensions at the highest level of the monarchy.
King Charles has named his youngest brother, Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, a title held, of course, by his late father, Prince Philip, for more than 70 years.
Something deeply disturbing has just exploded out of Prince Edward's legal files, and this time the palace cannot quietly bury it. Official documentation has now confirmed that Edward is holding two royal titles operating under two completely different legal systems at the exact same time. One survives through inheritance. The other dies completely the moment Edward himself dies. And the collision between those two titles has now exposed a hidden crisis involving his son James that Buckingham Palace reportedly never wanted the public to fully understand. Royal insiders are said to be in absolute panic tonight because the deeper people look into these documents, the darker this entire story becomes. What first appeared to be a simple royal title arrangement is now being described as one of the most carefully engineered succession structures the monarchy has ever built, and according to people close to the palace, it may have been deliberately designed to push Edward's own son out of one of the royal family's most historic legacies forever. James is still only beginning adult life, yet decisions affecting the rest of his future were reportedly made behind closed doors years before he was old enough to object. And the most explosive part of all is that many royal observers believe King Charles made these choices under heavy influence from Queen Camilla, whose growing control inside palace walls has become impossible to ignore. The monarchy may still be smiling in public, but privately, this situation is becoming dangerously difficult to contain. Because to understand why these legal documents are causing such chaos, you first have to understand the prince nobody ever took seriously. Long before Edward became Duke of Edinburgh, before the polished public appearances beside Sophie, before he rebuilt his image as one of the monarchy's most dependable royals, Edward was considered the failure of the family. In February 1987, at just 22 years old, Edward walked away from Royal Marines training after only 4 months. For an ordinary young man, quitting military training might have passed quietly. But Edward was not ordinary. He was the youngest son of Prince Philip, a man whose entire identity was built around military discipline, endurance, sacrifice, and wartime service in the Royal Navy during World War II. Philip reportedly took Edward's decision as a humiliation. Charles had served in both the RAF and Royal Navy. Andrew had flown helicopters during the Falklands War under active combat conditions. Edward became the prince who quit, and the British tabloids showed him absolutely no mercy. Headlines mocked him relentlessly. Commentators laughed openly. Palace traditionalists quietly viewed him as weak. And according to royal insiders, Philip himself struggled to hide how furious and disappointed he was. That image followed Edward everywhere. After leaving the Marines, Edward appeared lost. He drifted through royal life without a clear role while the press treated him like a permanent embarrassment. In a monarchy built around duty and structure, aimlessness itself became a scandal. Eventually, Edward found his way into theater and television production. He worked briefly for Andrew Lloyd Webber's company before launching his own production company, Arden Productions, in 1996. For palace traditionalists, this was already uncomfortable territory. A prince working in entertainment and media blurred lines the monarchy normally kept carefully separated. But Edward pushed forward anyway. Then came the disaster that nearly destroyed his reputation permanently. In 2001, Prince William had just started university at St. Andrews. The palace spent months negotiating a special media agreement designed to protect William from press intrusion during his studies. Every major British outlet agreed to leave him alone, so he could experience normal student life. Then Edward's company broke the agreement. Arden Productions filmed William walking around campus for commercial documentary material. The palace reaction was reportedly explosive. Charles was furious. Royal aides were stunned that the future king's own uncle had violated an agreement every other media organization had respected. Edward was publicly humiliated once again. He issued an apology, and shortly afterward Arden Productions collapsed completely. His television career was finished. But behind all those public failures, another battle had been following Edward for years, one far more personal and painful. Throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, British tabloids relentlessly targeted Edward with speculation about his private life and sexuality. Because he remained unmarried into his 30s and worked in theater and television, newspapers treated him like an open target. In 1995, one tabloid even published direct allegations involving Edward's personal relationships. The palace denied the claims, but Edward himself stayed silent. He never publicly fought back, never explained, never responded directly. For more than a decade, he absorbed the humiliation quietly while the monarchy avoided confronting the situation publicly. By the time Edward announced his engagement to Sophie Rhys-Jones in 1999, he had already endured years of ridicule, scandal, and public mockery. Many royal commentators believe the marriage itself helped stabilize his image after such a difficult decade. And when their wedding finally arrived, everyone expected Edward to receive a dukedom just like Charles and Andrew before him. But something strange happened instead. Edward became Earl of Wessex. Not Duke of Wessex. Earl of Wessex. The decision shocked royal watchers because senior royal sons traditionally received dukedoms automatically. Palace officials claimed Edward and Sophie preferred a lower-profile title. But Buckingham Palace made another announcement at the same time, one that would eventually become the center of this entire legal crisis. The palace publicly promised that Edward would one day inherit Prince Philip's title, Duke of Edinburgh. That promise mattered enormously. Philip's Edinburgh title was not just prestigious, it was deeply tied to his entire public identity and legacy. But hidden underneath that promise was a legal structure almost nobody outside palace lawyers understood at the time. Edward was now connected to two entirely different title systems. The Earl of Wessex title could pass through inheritance to his son James. But the future Duke of Edinburgh title would eventually operate under completely separate legal rules. One title would continue beyond Edward's death. The other would end forever with him. And according to newly surfaced legal confirmations, that distinction is now creating chaos behind palace walls. For years, Edward stayed quiet. He rebuilt himself slowly beside Sophie. He became reliable, disciplined, scandal-free. The British public gradually forgave him. Over time, many even came to admire him for his quiet loyalty. Then everything changed. Prince Philip died in April 2021. Queen Elizabeth died in 2022. The two people who had personally guaranteed Edward's future inheritance were gone. Only one person could still honor the promise: King Charles. And at first, it appeared Charles might refuse completely. In 2021, reports emerged claiming Charles planned not to give Edward the Duke of Edinburgh title at all. Palace insiders suggested Charles wanted a slimmed-down monarchy with fewer hereditary titles attached to extended family branches. Others claimed political concerns surrounding Scottish independence made reviving the Edinburgh title risky. But behind the scenes, another name reportedly kept surfacing: Camilla. Sophie had quietly remained warm toward Princess Diana during the years Charles and Camilla's affair devastated the royal family internally. Some insiders believed old tensions were never forgotten. By the time Camilla became queen, her influence over Charles had reportedly become enormous. Then finally, in March 2023, on Edward's 59th birthday, Charles made the announcement. Edward became Duke of Edinburgh. Publicly, it looked like Philip's promise had finally been fulfilled. But buried deep inside the legal wording were two devastating words: life peerage. Most people missed what that meant. Unlike Philip's hereditary dukedom, Edward's version dies completely when Edward dies. It cannot automatically pass to James. The moment Edward passes away, the Duke of Edinburgh title returns directly to the crown. James will never inherit it. And once royal observers fully understood that structure, outrage exploded. Because Philip reportedly wanted the title preserved through Edward's bloodline permanently. Charles instead created a temporary arrangement that stops with Edward entirely. At the same time, another legal switch activates. When Edward dies, James inherits the Earl of Wessex title while simultaneously losing any claim to Edinburgh forever. One title disappears. Another activates instantly. That complicated exchange is exactly what Edward's lawyers have now formally documented. But then the documents revealed an even bigger problem hidden underneath everything else. Under royal rules established in 1917, James has always legally had the right to become Prince James with full HRH status. Edward and Sophie simply chose not to use the title while raising their children privately. James turned 18 in 2025. He still has not activated the title, but legally the entitlement still exists, and palace lawyers cannot simply erase it from succession paperwork. That creates a constitutional headache no modern royal lawyers have ever dealt with before. Because if James ever decides to activate his prince status, he would technically outrank his own father within royal hierarchy. A prince of the blood royal carries higher constitutional status than an earl or many hereditary peers. Suddenly, palace lawyers would need to rewrite documents, protocols, inheritance structures, and precedence arrangements surrounding Edward's family. And insiders believe all of this complexity exists for one reason: Princess Charlotte. According to multiple royal reports, the long-term palace plan is for the Duke of Edinburgh title to eventually return to the crown after Edward's death, so Prince William can later grant it to Charlotte. That explains why Charles structured Edward's dukedom as temporary instead of hereditary. If James inherited Edinburgh permanently, Charlotte would never have access to it. But by using a life peerage, Charles ensured the title could eventually move into William's direct family line instead, which means James was not accidentally excluded. He was deliberately removed from the succession path years before he was even old enough to fully understand it. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this story is the silence surrounding it all. Edward waited 24 years for the title promised by his parents. Sophie spent decades supporting the monarchy through scandal after scandal. Their children stayed quiet, avoided royal privilege, and lived modestly compared to other royal descendants. Yet in the end, the institution still reshaped the future above their heads without giving them real control over the outcome. Louise quietly studies at St. Andrews while working ordinary jobs away from royal attention. James reportedly wants little public involvement with royal life at all. Edward and Sophie continue carrying out engagements without complaint while the monarchy reorganizes itself around William's future generation. And now, because these legal documents have finally surfaced publicly, royal watchers are beginning to realize something deeply unsettling. The monarchy may have already decided exactly who matters in the next royal era and exactly who does not.